So switches. There's a lot I can say about kind of the philosophy and the way that I think of switches in general. But I do want to focus a little more on solving them for this particular talk. Uh, so the first thing that we should establish is it a switch? And what I mean is clearly you can create a design where there are two states and or more and that are distinct from each other and then try to solve them. Of course, there are many switch puzzles where the states are identical. Um, but the first thing I always do is I look to see if indeed a switch switches, because that'll save you a lot of time and effort otherwise. So here is a very seemingly intimidating switch. It is massive, almost 400 base pairs. And believe it or not, so few people have solved this. It's truly astounding. But when you look at what actually happens, the entire switching action is a single base pair. That is it. If you could solve the rest of the structure, you essentially have this solved. So for anyone looking to get an easy switch, Flying Gladius Takes Flight that I made ages ago has like, I don't know, like 10 solvers or something. And it's the easiest switch in the world because the switch itself is just a single base pair. So switches can be have very small switching action, or they can have wholesale switching action where the entire shape transforms. And of course, we're more interested in ones that do that. So for this talk, I'm going to focus initially on this puzzle right here by Malcolm, my 1056th switch puzzle. And then after I run through this, maybe I'll do a few puzzles, a few switches that I've never tried before, but show you my thought process as I go through them. The first thing I do when I come to a switch is I fill it in with the base pairs. I think of this, in my notes, I describe this as establishing pair-ity. That is getting all the base pairs set up so that they are paired appropriately, right? Purine to pyrimidine and such, back and forth across the entire structure for all states involved. That is the first step for me whenever I attempt to solve any switch. And there are options, of course. So I actually went through earlier and made different examples of how to establish this pair-ity, as I call it. So here's one where we have the alternating base pairs here, but we could start with the inverse, the base pairs flipped the other way. Or we could have placed the base pairs in parallel, such as here. And of course, the alternative, all the bases flipped the other way once again. And so we do have these options for parallel placement of base pairs and alternate placement of base pairs. All right, so I'll close out of these for now. I should say that I have a document that I put together in part for this talk. It is never going to be finished to my satisfaction, but hopefully I'll have something that not too far in the future I'll be able to share that has all of these ideas expanded just a bit more. So it turns out that when you run the numbers, the best strategy for starting out in a switch are alternating AU pairs. This will give your target delta between the two states. The average of that delta will be lower for that than for any other pair arrangement, or at least general pair arrangement to start with. So let's see. So yeah, so I always start with this arrangement here, and I've saved the time by going in and doing that. And in some cases, you'll actually solve the switch just by doing that, just by making the pairs. It's that easy sometimes. In this case, It has not solved it. So what's the next step? The next thing I do is I look for hotspots. That is those structures that require specific pairing in order to solve, or for mismatches, right? Unpaired bases that want to pair, right? Those are the things I look for. So going through, we have this in this first state, we have this mismatch here. In the second state, we have this mismatch right beyond the closing pair there. And in terms of specific structures, uh, what can be rather finicky, of course, are short stems ending with a tri-loop, as seen here. So then, what do we do? So for myself, maybe I'll see if I can find a way to get rid of this mismatch here. So let's put in I'm going to put in a GC pair. It's always dangerous using those. And try to make it, since C can't pair with A, let's see. And there we go. If we go back, I was at 4.2 in the first state. I put that in, all of a sudden down to 2.9. The energy in the second state is unchanged. We've made progress and prevented this mispairing in the first state. Well, that's good. Well, I know this tri-loop's going to be finicky, so maybe rather than trying to be clever with some complicated arrangement not involving GC pairs, maybe I'll just place a GC pair for the sake of it. So I'll put one in. And of course, you can see that we need to make that a GC pair as well. Well, once again, the energies have gotten much lower. My goodness. And so we're close. We're finally close. So what else can we do? Well, once we've cleared up specific mismatches, and here's the last one, let's see. Aha, there we go. We've removed all the potential mispairings from the structure itself for a single state, and it's solved state 2, but we still need to reduce that energy in state 1 to get that to stabilize. So now, only now, do I start thinking about things like boosting or pair choice in general. And so we have some options here for boosting this loop, right? If we go between natural and target mode, we can see that the right side of our switch is switching within itself, which is not what we want. So let's try this. Let's put in a base somewhere. We have an option of boosting the tetra loop or this internal loop here. Well, let's try the tetra loop, see what we get. Hey, well, that's better. Well, that's stabilized, but now we got to close these last few pairs here. So several options here, but let's look at this internal loop and see if we can boost that as well. And I use the highlighting tool to look at each pair as it is between states. I don't think I've ever purposefully solved a switch without using the highlighting tool, which for PC users, you hold down Control and click, and I believe I would imagine it's Command click for Apple. So let's see. We don't have anything that's going to get immediately destroyed if we place a G. So let's try. And there we go. Well, that was easy. Would the other one have worked? And there it is. So by placing that boost there, by doing that, we've solved this particular switch. All right. Well, that's good. So now comes the harrowing part. Now comes the harrowing part. Let's see. Let's try this and uncleared and type in this handy word. And I already know there's going to be a few here that I'm just going to skip over for the sake of my own self. And once again, I'll just open one of these beautiful puzzles that I have never solved. my 360-second switch puzzle. Malcolm's left me quite a few to get through. Now, I should say that I always start out placing AU pairs, and I highlight them as I go so that I know that I've already addressed them. Here, we can see that this is a non-switching portion. This is a non-switching portion. We don't have to necessarily worry about that. So let's focus on the rest of it. Placing pairs is ultimately a bit of an art, and I'm not going to claim to be a master of it, but I certainly have practice. And so the first thing is when I purposely place pairs myself, I generally follow an alternating AU pattern throughout the structure as a default. However, if I know that placing a base, I'll go back just a little here. If I know that placing a base is going to cause potentially an issue, I will choose a different placement. So for instance, here at this base, if I were to make this a U, in state 1, all of a sudden we have this potential unwanted pairing that can happen here between base 6 and 19. So that doesn't seem good. That seems like that's going to move us farther away from what we want. So here we go. So I've made that an A. I'm going to make that a U, and you go through, and I highlight, and I go through and paint my way through the bases as I go, moving back and forth between the states until I have followed my placement all the way through. I always try to establish which pairs are going to be U or C, G or A, as I go through before I start picking which base I'm going to mutate next. And for myself, I always follow all the way through the full pattern of painting that comes from making a single base choice. Here we decided we wanted this to be A, and immediately the rest of this automatically has to be paired as it is based on that single choice. So if I had selected otherwise, right, these would all be flipped the other way, but these are linked to each other, these pairs. And if we were to simply go and just use like an alternating sequence and go U all the way through, we might end up with these incongruities, right? These UU mismatches where we want pairs otherwise. So I always try to avoid that early on. And plug for an idea real fast. For smaller switches, this isn't such a big deal, and it's kind of fun to highlight and paint my way through. But for large switches or switches with locked bases, it would be great to have some type of feature or tool where once I've made this change here to an A, as I play through, I know this is going to be a U, right? This makes this an A, this makes this a U, this makes this an A, and that makes this a U. But it would be great if using the highlighting that we've used in the ribosome lab and the coronavirus labs, right? The open corona, open ribosome, to use that type of highlighting as a predictive tool once you've made a change to show you which bases are linked to it. Where now you've made this change, the rest of these bases are now limited based on that. If I knew a little more coding, I'd write the script myself, but I had to share that thought, or I'd never forgive myself. All right, enough about that. So moving on, I now have another option here, and we have another possibility for mispairing, and here we're going to be forced to make a choice. Because if I make this a U, this is potentially can form a pair here, which we don't want. But if I make this a U, in state 1 now, we have this issue. So we're going to have to wing it. And in this particular case, I usually default to just a simple zigzag. If it's going to be mispaired either way, I just follow that through. And essentially hope for the best. Ah, here we go. At this particular pair now, which is 47 and 22, we have these bases here. The G here, if I place a U in state one, isn't going to pair with that U, but if I were to place it here at position 22, right, potentially that's going to cause interference with the A at base 45. So this type of decision making in terms of how we place pairs uh, plays in to how I make these choices when I'm solving a switch. And obviously I make them much quicker than I'm showing them here. But I wanted to at least kind of really pull back for a moment and just say, okay, this isn't going to work if I put this here. It's going to probably cause a problem, right, between base 22 and base 45. So maybe I'll try it the other way. Oh, look, between base 18 and 47, those aren't going to pair. So perfect. That should cause less of a problem. All right. So now we just have the rest of this stem to kind of fill in. And again, we have a choice. We have an A at 43. And so at 26, I'm going to want to make that an A2, ideally, if I can, just to avoid, once again, mispairings. We don't want to create these little fires that we have to put out later. And here, highlighting the last pair, it doesn't seem like it'll matter which way it goes necessarily. And so I default to my zigzag. All right. So now, looking at energies between the states, we got clearly a lot of work to do in state two. So I look on over here, and now it's down time to choose which bases are we going to strengthen. Maybe I can strengthen with a GU pair here. Maybe I'll start adding GCs. I have some limited options for boosts. I can boost base 28, and it should give an energy bonus to the second state without adding anything to the first. And if it comes to it, I have an option for boosting at base 26 in the first state, but I'm going to hold off on that for the moment because its target energy is closer to what we want, even though it's unbound. And so I'm going to hold off on there too. So let's focus on state two. All right, I think I am going to boost. There we go. And immediately it solves the shape, but we still have this big number disparity here. So I mentioned that we have this mispairing possibility here between bases 24 and 36. Well, U and A pair, but C and A don't. And we need a lot of shoring up for the energy here. So let's make a 24-44 GC pair and see what that does for the energy. That's better. We just dropped 2 kilocalories there. That's fantastic. And there we go. Obviously, we have to make a GC pair in state 1 as well. And overall, it did wonders. Wow. I dropped to almost 3 kilocal in state 2 and almost all the way down to below 0 in the first state, which is wonderful. Now I'm noticing that there is mispairing between the closing pairs, which are not part of the switch, and the rest of the structure. And so I'm just going to tease that a little just to see. And it looks like nothing I do to adjust those pairs, flipping them back and forth, is going to fix that. But if you see something easy, seemingly, right, a structure that by all means should be stable, that isn't involved with the switching, but is causing a mispair such that your state isn't going to solve, you can often, with a longer stem and maybe some some dangling ends, you have some options for addressing those more stable regions that are shared between the states, rather than trying to prevent the misfolding from the point of view of the switch itself, the switching action of each state. Here, it's been forced on us. Shucks. So, all right. So now I'm gonna play the risky game and try to place GC pairs and see what happens. I'm watching the energies very carefully. I want to be sure that when I reduce the energy in one state, whether it be the first or the second, that I'm not instantly ratcheting the energy up in the other state. Uh, Often, if you were to go through, and the reason I choose AU pairs when I first uh, fill in all the bases for a switch, is that when you put GC pairs through all GC pairs, almost always you get a state that's very low and a state that's very high. Well, here we have the same thing, uh, which has been forced on me, unfortunately. Hmm. All right, so now I'm going to play around placing GC pairs, see if I can bring that energy down. Let's try it. Let's see what we get if I do this. Well, that reduces that. It reduces the energy in state 2, but raises it in state 1. All right, let's go back. Maybe that's not the best option. Let's try this closing pair for the pentaloop here. And that also does the same thing. Third option. Oh, that's the worst of them all. All right, so I just worked through it. This is just experimentation to see. And if the energy drops in both states, then I take it that maybe I'm on the right track. It's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed at all, but it's hopeful. And so I continue. Place a GC pair, reduced the energy in the second state. The energy in the first state hasn't changed for ill, so that's promising. And now what do we got? I still have to close the pair over here. And let's see. How about that? And so once again, noticing that there's misfolding happening between the what should be a non-switching section and the rest of the switch, I play with that, and now that's stable. But you can see where the actual problem lies. We've reduced the instability. Aha. So I put in my GC pairs. Oh, what do you know? This one requires a lot of them. When it has all the short stems like this, you're forced to use a lot more GC pairs than would otherwise be advisable, as they are more inclined towards misfolding if you have any unpaired bases. And so I try not to use them first. All right, I'm going to see if I can make this a GC pair. Maybe this will solve it. We're close, relatively close. Let's see. Nope. And no. Ooh. Close. So maybe we're going to have to break this parity I established. Some of these choices were arbitrary. And so I know that and can undo those. So these bases down here in the hairpin of state 2 were chosen on a whim. And so I'm going to just drop a pair there, whichever way. Aha. Okay. And now let's see if that'll do. No. I've brought the energy so close, so tantalizingly close. Wow. 0.03 kilocals off. What a heck of a thing. But I also have this mispairing with the stem again. There's only so much you can do with this tiny thing. Hey, there you go. Had a feeling that would play back into it. And so, all right. So there we go.